So I'll read them out. For us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace.
Cool. Thank you, Andrew. And I received an email during the week from Jessica. How you going, Jessica? I didn't realise that there were going to be more than one coming, so that's all good. As a introduction to the person who's leading next week? I can't remember. Suzanne. We'll be doing Isaiah 9:6 next week as well. And who's leading the week after? I can't remember. We're doing Isaiah 9:6 that week as well. And the week after, we're doing Isaiah 9:6 again. So that there's 4 different titles for Jesus in Isaiah 9:6. So we're looking at them in the lead up to Christmas. There are many types of government around our world. Some of them are democracies, and there are different types of democracies around. There's communism, and a few countries are ruled by dictators. Now, I believe it is true to say that there are no countries that are truly Christian. But it is good to live in Australia where lots of our foundations are built upon Christian principles. What do you think it would be like living in a country run by a Christian dictator? Is anyone going to put up their hand to be that Christian dictator? A bit like The Handmaid's Tale? I haven't seen that series, but I know. Anyone know what an oxymoron is? Yeah, a bit like a good Baptist or something like that. But a Christian dictator is an oxymoron. How would a Christian dictator respond to Jesus when he said this? You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Sort of speaks against the possibility of a Christian dictator, doesn't it? When we look at the life of Jesus, there are 2 things that don't sit with us in terms of our experience of rulers. For example, in Jesus we see an authority that baffles us. In Mark 1, Jesus commanded an unclean spirit to come out of the man, and with a loud voice the unclean spirit came out and departed. And the people were amazed, and they said, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." Jesus had an authority that they had never seen before, not even in any of their leaders. And sometimes I wonder whether we would see that authority in our leaders as well. And then secondly, in John chapter 16 and verse 15, Jesus escaped to the mountains because he could see that the people wanted to come and make him king. Jesus didn't want to be an earthly king. That's not what he came for. But did Jesus shrink back from being king? There's a bit of a catch to that question, by the way. When Jesus was before Pilate, do you remember what Pilate asked him? "Are you the King of the Jews?" And what did Jesus say? Yep, he said, "You have said so." Jesus didn't deny being king. He didn't shrink back from who he was. At the same time, he didn't claim an earthly crown. Instead, Jesus allowed himself to be unjustly tried, nailed to a cross. He gave up his life, and then 3 days later, he rose from the dead. In Jesus' birth, life, death, and resurrection, He shows us that he is king and what sort of a king he is. One of the beauties of Jesus' kingship, a beauty that I think makes him an even firmer king, if that is possible, is that for thousands of years, God has been promising the arrival of King Jesus. And over the next 4 Sundays in the lead up to Christmas, we'll be looking at the kingship of Jesus. What sort of a king is Jesus? The Isaiah 9 and 6, verse 6 passage gives us 4 characteristics of Jesus' kingship, and we're going to look at each one of those 4 characteristics in this Advent time of the year. And the first characteristic is that wonderful counselor. If we were to look at the first part of the book of Isaiah, we would find that Isaiah attacks the foolishness of Israel's counselors. Isaiah prophesied during the reigns of some good kings and some ungodly kings. Each king would have had their own advisors, their own counselors. And in Isaiah 1 verse 26, Isaiah says, "And I will restore your judges as at the first, and your counselors as at the beginning. Afterwards you shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city." In other words, Isaiah looked at the human counselors of the day and saw that they lacked godly wisdom. He looked into the future and says that God will restore to them the type of counselors they had in the beginning. Having good counselors, godly counselors, is important if we want to let godliness rule our lives. In Isaiah 3 and verse 3, Isaiah says that the Lord of hosts will remove the counselors, the magicians, and the experts of charms. In other words, Isaiah had no time for the counselors of the day because they were spouting human folly as opposed to godly wisdom, and they will be removed. In contrast to the counselors that Isaiah was looking at, there is one coming who has now come, who will be a wonderful counsellor. Now the word wonderful means that this counsellor transcends all the limits of human understanding. There was a time in Israel's life when they were being ruled by the Philistines. Again, there was a man named Manoah and his wife, and they had no children. You can read this in Judges 13. They were visited by an angel who told them that they were going to have a child. When the angel visited them the second time, Manoah asked this. He said, "What is your name, so that when your words come true, we may honour you?" The angel replied, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" Isaiah picks up on the word wonderful in order to say that divinity is behind all of this. The counsellor who is coming, who has now come, is none other than the second person of the Trinity. We know him by the name Jesus, and Jesus is not slow in offering counsel. Now I'm going to want to talk about that in a few more minutes again in greater detail, but before I do, I want to ask a couple of questions that may seem like a digression. Now the first question is, why did Jesus come? I think what Sylvia just said is, I'll put it here. Did you read my sermon there? Did you know? To save people from their sins. Where do you find that? The passage, Bible verse that we all should know, John 3:16. And I'm going to say, yes, our salvation is an important part of that answer, but is that the first or the second reason why Jesus came? What are the first 4 words of the Bible? In the beginning, God. The Bible is firstly and lastly, from beginning to end, about God. If we stop and think about it, that's the way it ought to be. God is not there for us. We are there for him. It is true that Jesus came to save people from their sins, but I think if we are the first thought, then I think we have displaced God. When we sinned, what did we do? Separated ourselves from God. Yes. How else? What other answers can you give to that? Are there any answers from outside in the foyer? I can't hear you. You've got to speak loudly. Why did Jesus came? When we sinned, what did we do? Remember the first 4 words of the Bible? In the beginning, God. When we ate the fruit, we dishonoured God. I'm suggesting to you this morning that the first reason Jesus came was to restore God's honour. And he did that by defeating Satan and making salvation possible for everyone. So the primary focus for Jesus was God. And we are an important but second reason. Let me ask another question. Was Jesus, or perhaps I ought to say, is Jesus, a smart, brainy man? Have you ever thought of Jesus as a smart man? Yes? Yep. Good. All-knowing. When we apply human wisdom to that question, we may say no, because he allowed himself to be killed. But consider this. Who created everything out of nothing? Jesus did. John 1, 1-3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things Not just a few things, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And verse 14, the Word became flesh, that is Jesus. We look around at creation and we marvel at its complexities. The more we discover, the more we marvel, and this is after the fall. Imagine what it must have been like before the fall. Who created all of this? Who knows it in the finest and minutest of detail so that it all works together perfectly? Who knows everything there is, even all the details that we don't know yet? Is Jesus not the smartest man who has and will ever walk this planet? Is his counsel not worth listening to? Isn't he a wonderful counsellor? There are three things I want to say about our wonderful counsellor. And in this first one, I'm going back to what I was trying to say earlier. And that is about Jesus being the second person of the Trinity. So the first thing I want to say is, in the form of a question, how can Jesus be our wonderful counsellor? Or to put that another way, why not someone else? Some people have questioned either the humanity or the divinity of Jesus. If Jesus is human but not divine, then he may have experienced everything we experience, but if he is not divine, then he doesn't know everything and his counsel can be questioned. On the other hand, if Jesus is divine but not human, then how can he know what it is we need since he hasn't experienced human life? But Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, trained in carpentry, walked the dusty roads of Palestine, and so he knows what it is to be human and what it is to live a human life. Jesus was also divine, as seen from where he came from, in the many miracles he did, and in the religious leaders' opposition to him. The only reason Jesus can be our wonderful counsellor, and the only reason he alone is our wonderful counsellor, is in the fact that he is both divine and human. Secondly, again in the form of a question, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Wisdom is knowing how to use the knowledge. She's obviously read my sermon. We are told that it is the fear of the Lord that is the beginning of wisdom, in Proverbs 9 and verse 10. Luke 2 and verse 52 says that Jesus, as a 12-year-old, grew in wisdom and stature and in favour both with God and man. Paul says in Colossians 2, 1-3, "For I want you to know how great a struggle I have for you and for those in Laodicea, and for all who have not seen me face to face, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, to reach all the riches of full assurance of understanding and the knowledge of God's mystery, which is Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge." The wisdom and knowledge Jesus has is both spiritual and physical. If we want to know what life is, then we go to Jesus and ask. Whether that life is eternal or whether it is daily living we enjoy here on this planet. If we want to know, we ask. As our wonderful counsellor, we can go to Jesus seeking his knowledge and wisdom so we can live life to the glory of God. Thirdly, I want to say that Jesus is our helper. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says this, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. While we are living in this world, our real battle is not in the physical realm. Ephesians 6 and verse 12 says that our true battle is in the heavenly realm. And since Jesus knows all about this, whether it's the physical or the spiritual, he is able to help. And not just in terms of being able, wanting to help. As our wonderful counsellor, he does help us. And so we can truly be the people of God that he wants us to be. We officially celebrate the birth of Jesus in 26 days. Now, hopefully, in reality, we celebrate the birth of Jesus every day. But there is something special about putting one day aside, one day per year, and specifically celebrating the birth of Jesus. When did we last celebrate the birth of Jesus? Wasn't it yesterday? Time goes so fast, doesn't it? And tomorrow everything will be over. It's as if the birth of Jesus comes whooshing past. And it is great. If not to slow down, then extend the period that we remember and celebrate. And that period is what we call Advent. Preparing ourselves for that special day where we specifically celebrate what we've been celebrating all year, 24/7. But Advent, let's slow down. Let's remember. Let's put aside the strong commercial aspect of our world. Let's put aside Father Christmas. Let's put aside holidays. Let's approach this Christmas time with our eyes on Jesus so that we don't miss him. Jesus is our wonderful counsellor. Not so that we live a better life so that we like it more, but so that we live a life that is a blessing to God. A blessing to God? Oh no, that's the right way of putting it. A life that gives honour back to God. May we never miss Jesus. Amen. Now we're going to sing again, but it's a song that particularly picks up Isaiah 9 and verse 6. For unto us a child is born. I know it's another Christmas carol, but then again, this is the Christmas Advent time of the year, isn't it? Thank you, Andrew.
For unto us a child is born. Please stand.